We're back and we are moving on to point one, our tentative budget workshop. And we'll let you start off with that before we do any more things to move on anything.
Yes, we're going to do a presentation in regards to our budget. One of the things usually Jason gets up here and does the budget on his own. I want everybody to really understand this is a budget collectively developed by the campus. It starts with our program review process, and so everybody does contribute into this budget. One of the things that I think has happened over the years is we all rely on Jason to come up here and tell everybody what is happening with the budget and to find the solutions. And I think we need to kind of change that narrative up, that it is a college budget. It's all of us working towards this. It's not Jason's budget, but it is College of the Canyons budget. And so I asked Jason when he was preparing this thing is, can I get up and talk first? Because we need to collectively do this together. And so, and I know that we have relied on Jason and especially the business services staff. So I do want to thank all of them for being here and the work that they do. So thank you. There are a lot of people who go into the process of this, but our business services staff under Jason's leadership has really dove in deep. They really take a lot of time with this, and it is not just 40 hours, let me go do it and then let me leave. They put their heart and soul into developing this and finding solutions for the campus, because over the past few years, we have been outspending what our revenue is. And this has been a consistent trend for many years at this college. So I really want to thank them for collectively doing that. I want to thank the campus community for doing their program reviews to be able to come up with our budget needs and what it is that we're doing. I also want to thank all the budget managers out there for being responsible budget managers. One of the messages that I do try and push out across the campus, and I have for many years, is we are stewards of taxpayer money and we need to do good with that. This is not our money. This is not ours, like our household. This is taxpayer money that we are working with. So we need to be good stewards of that money. So this budget that we're going to present to you tonight is based on the May revise. This is not based on the final budget of California. So you have to know that because we are making assumptions based on that May revise. They may change. Things may change between what we present tonight and even next week. And so between now and the adopted budget, there will be changes that we need to make to be able to present to you. A lot has been said many times is our budget is a statement of our values, and I couldn't agree more. Our values are reflected in this budget. We want to make sure that we value and we show the community that we value not only the students of this district, but our employees. And so that is first and foremost in our budget. 89.6% of our budget is employees. It is where our salaries lie. It's where our healthcare lies. It's where all of our benefits lie for our employees. We first and foremost value that, and we want to make sure that that is a clear message sent not only to the campus community, but our community as a whole. We are one of the largest employers in this valley. And so we want to showcase to this campus, to the entirety community, where our values lie. And I think the budget that we're presenting to you tonight showcases that. Do we want to do more? Yes, always. And as we grow as a college district and our revenues grow, that it will be shown by the different ways of which we support our employees as well. So even though we've had our expenditures outpace our revenue over the past few years, we want to make sure that we continue to support our employees in every way we can. Things that we've done in the past to do that is we have not done a hiring freeze. However, we have done like a hiring chill, where we haven't stopped hiring. We will continue to hire, but we need to make sure we're doing so in a meaningful way. Which positions are we doing and which positions are we doing first? We are well over FON, which is our faculty obligation number. However, we continue to hire faculty. We have not stopped that because we know that we need to do that for our students. We need to do that for our faculty as well. So we have not stopped hiring our classified staff. We know that there are valuable positions that we need, but we're trying to be very good stewards of the budget to be able to do that in a meaningful way. We also have not cut programs directly to our students. We received a huge cut from the federal government in regards to our
Title V funding. However, we worked to be able to find funding here at the college to be able to support those programs. We really want to make sure we showcase our values to our students. We work very hard to make sure that those programs that support our students do not get cut. How can we continue to do the work in different ways? How can we do that with the budgets that we have? How can we ensure that our people are whole? And so I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that. I want to make sure that you know that we are looking at our different, every time a position becomes vacated, we look to see, is that something we need to rehire? I think that that has to start from the top down. And I think that we have done that at this college over the past year. One of the things that we have worked on is, especially within executive cabinet, as people have left executive cabinet, do we need to replace that position? We have to showcase from the top down that we are willing to do the same thing that we are asking everybody on campus to do. So I want to make sure that that is clear as well. It is my job to make sure that I bring you a budget that is fiscally sound. It is my job to make sure that we get there in that place. However, part of our board policies state that I must do that with the collective goal of the campus. So one of the things that you'll see tonight is our budget is not balanced. We are coming in at $2 million short. It is incumbent upon me, it is incumbent upon our executive cabinet to work with the different constituents on campus to close that gap. And that is a dedication that I'm telling you tonight that I will be doing between now and adopted budget. I will bring you a balanced budget at the adopted budget. You will not see a shortfall between at the adopted budget. Once we know from the May revise what our budget is, what our allocation is going to be, and we need to turn and look to see what our expenditures are, it takes more than a month to make that determination. So this is truly a tentative budget. And you, at the adopted budget, you have your true facts for 26, 27. That is incredibly difficult because we start 26, 27 in 20-something days. So I know that that is very difficult to be able to do, to ask you as a board to be able to approve this tentative budget, knowing that we're starting that fiscal year very shortly. But that's what I'm asking of you tonight, is it is an unbalanced budget, but that's because I need to do the work that we are supposed to do collectively as a whole over the next few months to be able to deliver you an adopted budget. All of that is outlined in Board Policy 6200 and AP 6200. So I want you to know that as we do this work, we're following that board policy and that administrative procedure to make that happen. Again, this budget was done based on the May revise that will hope change. As Jason will present tonight, you're going to see a lot of information that you have seen in the past. Jason is going to present what is happening at the state level. He is going to present how that happened, how that affects our local level. However, I've asked, and Jason and I have refined to be able to bring you actual numbers over the last 6 years of how we have balanced our budget. So you will be able to see collectively over the years how it is that we have been able to use what is considered our reserves in order to be able to balance our budget. We cannot continue to do that. There isn't much left in our reserves to do that anymore. Now we're to the place that we need to be more efficient with what we have because we are falling below that 16.7% threshold that we have set in our board policies, well below that, even with all of our other funding combined. So I want to put out there how serious this is and that collectively as a district, we are going to work very hard to ensure that we're doing right by taxpayer money. The taxpayers have entrusted this to us, so it is incumbent upon us to do that and to bring you an adopted budget that is balanced. Okay. Now, this is why advocacy is so important. One of the big things that you'll see in Jason's presentation today is we have been asking and advocating over the last year to have the state allow us to be flexible with the student-centered funding formula to be able to count either this current year's FTS or the average of the last 3 years. The governor did not have that in the May revise. However, both the Assembly and the Senate of the state do have that in their budgets. We are hoping that the governor will take that up. That would create a substantial benefit to us to be able to have that. I think that all the advocacy that all of you have done, that collectively this campus has done, and collectively the California Community Colleges as a whole is working. And we need to continue that advocacy. So thank you for doing that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Jasmine. You started with a bunch of thank yous. I'm going to do a couple thank yous here before I get started. Because if I wait to the end, I'm sick of hearing my own voice. I'm going to sit down before I get them done. So I want to thank Jasmine, Dr. Rise, for, I know this is the first time you've been this deep into a budget before, so I want to thank you for doing this with me over the last few months. I want to thank my executive cabinet colleagues as we've had lots of conversations about this. I want to thank the department chairs, directors, deans, and all the faculty and classified staff who participated in program review to get us the information we need to build this budget. I want to thank Lisa Hooper and Gail Frund, my PAC-B co-chairs, and all of PAC-B. Valuable questions and information come from that committee that help us do this. Thank our business services staff, some who are here, and a couple in particular. These are people that you will never see. They don't like the limelight. They don't want to stand in front of anybody. But the books you have, the PowerPoint we see, and the numbers that go in the systems, that's Mingwei Zhang, Ingrid Weeks, Rosie Kokendorfer, and John Young. Those four, again, you'll probably never see them because they like to do their work. It means a lot to them, but they're just in and out. They don't like any limelight, but I want to recognize them here. So with that, let's get started. You can start the clock now.
The 5 minutes starts now.
Okay. All right, so the first thing we want to do is talk about the legislative process. In January 9th, the governor approved the January governor's budget, and then on May 14th, he released his May revision. Before the 15th, the Senate and Assembly bill subcommittees are scheduled to meet and act on the budget. Like Jasmine said, they've already released what they wanted. Now they just need to formalize it and put it into a budget act. Both houses have to approve the state budget bill no later than the 15th. That's what Jasmine said. We're going to know more in the next week. By the 30th is when the governor needs to act and enact the budget no later than the 30th. So over the next couple of weeks, we will know what 26-27 looks like. After July 1st, the governor and legislator, they'll continue to negotiate on the final budget with their junior budget bills. That's getting all the legislation in place. So let's take a look at the overview of the California state budget. Overall, the total budget is almost $350 billion. That's an 8.8% increase over last year. The general fund itself is at $246.6 billion. This year, they've increased their state reserves by the $29.9 billion. Last year, if you remember all the way back to last year, they had to pull from the reserves to balance the budget. This year, with some of their additional one-time funding, they're putting money back into the reserves. The state budget is balanced due to stronger than expected revenues, especially from the stock market gains, but there is an ongoing concern. There is future structural deficits that they see in the budget because there's a lot of revenue volatility. So it is a balanced budget, it is a good budget at the state this year. However, they are concerned for future years. Community college funding is funded through Prop 98. There's $127 billion in Prop 98. 14.29% of that, or sorry, 14.29 billion, which is 10.97% of that, goes to community college. There is some modest growth in that, and there's a larger reliance on the general fund because there's lower property taxes across the state. So while the budget goes up, there is a more reliance on that general fund. COLA is 4.31% in total. However, it is split between two. There's a statutory 2.87% COLA that is given and a 1.4% discretionary COLA that is linked to AB 65, which is including that 14-week paid pregnancy disability leave. It is given to districts and to the colleges to enact that. The way that they're doing it is a problem, and we'll go through that because depending on where you are in the student-centered funding formula, you may not get any of that COLA or all of that COLA, but you're still required to give the 14 weeks of the pregnancy disability leave. Total COLA and apportionment related increases are $438 million in this year and an additional $36.7 million for categorical COLA adjustments. There's enrollment growth of 1.5% over 2 years. That's part for this current year they're backfilling as well as growth for next year. Again, overall outlook, it reflects improved fiscal conditions from the January's governor's budget. There is measured growth. They want to sustain existing programs, but they're preparing for that long-term fiscal risk that they see coming up. So it is a balanced approach using those short-term gains. However, there is long-term caution in the state budget. This slide real quick, it shows they call the big three. That is where our revenue comes from. It's primarily personal income tax, corporate tax, and sales tax. That is 98% of the revenue coming in. There's the rainy day fund, which we're given back to, and some other things that kind of make up the rest. But personal income tax, corporate tax, and sales tax, that's where the budget comes from for the state budget. Here is a list of all of the ongoing increases that are coming from the state in the May revision. You can see primarily the 291.9 million and 146.4 million is for the statutory COLA and that additional discretionary COLA. So right there is about 430 million of that 635 million of ongoing fund, primarily to the student-centered funding formula in those COLAs. The enrollment growth in SCFF growth, the 1% for this current year, 55 million, and 2 lines below that, you can see that's the other 0.5% for 26-27, and then an increase to the support the Calbright College, COLA for categorical programs, and then some other things there. I'm not going to read everything there, but that is primarily where the money is going. It is really put into the student-centered funding formula to support growth and other increases there. There is some one-time funding in this budget. This is what they're doing with the higher revenues at the state. Knowing that there is volatility in the future, they're giving money out one time as opposed to ongoing, which is a smart thing to do. Half of that money is to repay deferrals. Last year's budget, there were deferrals in payments, which just mean that we're not going to get our 25-26 revenue until 26-27. It'll be a few months deferred, but they were able to put that money in the 26-27 budget to make those payments. That's half of that one-time funding. There's a deferred maintenance grant, which is used for districts for deferred maintenance on campus, as well as you can use it for instructional equipment. $120.7 million for that. There's a $100 million student support block grant. We got $50 million last year. Another $100 million is given one time in the state this year. Another $88 million is to cover the shortfall from this year. Again, it's one-time money they're using to backfill because last year's budget was not good, so they're making up for that. Some money for the Common Cloud Data Platform, credit for prior learning. They're backfilling some apprentices funding shortfalls, and then there's the Adult Learner Demonstration project that was added in the May revise. So a lot of that one-time funding, as you can see, was to pay back deferrals, make up from last year, and try and right-size what was going on. These next few slides are just the details, everything we just talked about. If you want to see what was in the governor's budget to the May revise and whether there was an increase or decrease, you can see primarily in the May revise, the increases were to the COLA and some other small items there. But we already went over these, but again, some people like charts, some people like words. We want to make sure that information is there. It talks about all the new funding coming from the state. When we build a budget, we have to keep in mind the different state regulations that we want to stay in compliance with. There's the 50% law, which says 50% of the district's cost of education need to be spent on instructional salaries and benefits inside the classroom. This includes all salaries and benefits of instructors inside the classroom. It does not include instructional equipment. It does not include instructional supplies. This is only salaries and benefits. There are things it takes into account and things it doesn't. In 24-25, we reported 52.2% and we're in full compliance, and we project to be at about 52% in this next year. 70 of the 72 districts are in compliance with that. Those 2 districts that aren't are basic aid districts because they don't get any penalties for it anyway, so they can do what they need to do. We mentioned the full-time faculty obligation number. This is required, the number of full-time faculty a district needs to employ in each fall. It gets adjusted up and down based on fundable growth at the advanced apportionment and then at P2. As you can see, we have been in compliance and we project to remain in compliance for fall 2026. We project our obligation number to be at 201.7. We will be about 20 over that FON. I want to bring this up here because there's always questions about pension and OPEB, which is our other post-employment benefit or retiree health and welfare. There's 2 different concepts here. There's a liability and an expense. The liability for both pension and the OPEB are the large amount that we will have to pay over time. This gets carried on our balance sheet and are very large numbers. The pension liability is the state's responsibility. However, we keep it on our books, not in our fund, but on our overall balance sheet. And you see that when we see the audit, when we have those large deficits in the net position because those large balances are there. Our retiree health and welfare, that is a liability we have done each year by our actuarial. Our liability for retiree health and welfare benefits is $17.5 million. That's the cost we will eventually pay over time. Each of those have a expense to it as well. The expense for the pension is what we have to pay for all of our employees' STRS and PERS costs. That's an actual money out the door expense that we pay each year that we have to build into the budget. And for the retiree health and welfare, we pay about $700 each year to our retirees for their health and welfare benefit. So what you see in the budget here in Fund 11 is the expense for those different pension and OPEB liability or expenses, sorry. The state regulation about the fund balance, they came out and the state recommends a 16.7% fund balance. 6 of the 72 community college districts have fund balances below that 16.7%. We are one of them. Here is a history of what our fund balance is. Our 26-27 budgeted fund balance, again, with a deficit budget, is 9.8% in our Fund 11 reserves. We're going to go more into the fund balance later and go into how we got there and where it comes from. So I want to get into the tentative budget here. This is how it relates to us. Before we go, I always like to have a little refresher on the SCFF. The student-centered funding formula is how we get paid. That's where our apportionment funding comes from. In 23-24, the emergency conditions allowance ended. What the emergency condition allowance was, it allowed districts to use their pre-pandemic FTES inside the student-centered funding formula. That held us for many years at a higher level of funding compared to the FTES we actually were serving. That ended in 23-24. What that means is now we are strictly on our FTES that we are producing, which our high point before the pandemic was about 16,900. That's what we were getting paid for during that time. Currently, we're at about 15,600. So we're lower than that. Our low point before we got there was about 13,300. So we have recovered. We are coming back. We're not to where we were, but we no longer have that protection. We're going to talk about the FTES summer shift. This is for classes taking place between 2 fiscal years. So any class that are going on, they start, this week, they can start in June and end in July. We can claim those in either fiscal year. The district has the ability to choose which fiscal year it claims it in, so we can shift it between years depending on how it maximizes our funding. I'll show you in the next slides how we do that and how we maximize funding with that. There's a stability protection in the student-centered funding formula that says you cannot have revenue below what your prior year student-centered funding formula calculation was, plus the current year COLA. That is always an ongoing protection. And then there is what we know as hold harmless. It changed this year to what is known as a funding floor. Prior to this year, through 24-25, it was whatever your total computational revenue was in 17-18, which is when the student-centered funding formula started, and they add COLA every year. There were about 12 to 14 districts that were always below that. There was no need for them to go above because they would always just get COLA every year. The state wants districts on the student-centered funding formula. So what they said is starting in 25-26, whatever your 24-25 revenue is, that's your new funding floor, which means it will no longer increase by COLA, but you will not get lower than that revenue. So those districts who kind of just getting COLA every year now have to get above that funding floor in order to get new funding. So here is our FTES history and projections with no shift. So this is going to look different than what we claim in our apportionment reports because this is no shift. We're just taking 4 static terms. We're saying fall, winter, spring, and summer all count in one year, and the same terms count in the next year, not shifting between years. So if you can see in 22-23 going to 23-24, we were about the same. We increased going into 24-25, going from about 14.4 to 14.7. We had an adopted budget this year of about 15,600. We're looking to achieve 15,200. That reduction is primarily because we had some issues with our ISAs and the sheriff academies that we're trying to work through. However, we think we're going to stay static there, but we are trying to work through those. But you can see we're going to go up from about 14,700 FTS up about 500 FTES. Next year, we're looking at about a 230 FTS increase, 1.5% across the board, which is primarily a 2% increase in our credit FTES. This next slide is our FTES with the shifts. This is what we claimed. It's going to look different because in certain years, because of the funding formula, we shifted FTES either forward or back to maximize funding. You can see the 22-23 number looks a lot lower and the 24-25 number look lower, while that middle year of 23-24 looks high. We pulled both summers all we could into that 23-24 year. The reason we did that is because we know if we maximized our SCFF in that year, it would make our stability protection as high as we could in 24-25, which became our new funding floor. If we didn't do that, our funding floor and the revenue that we receive in 25-26 probably would have been about $2 to $3 million lower than what it was. So we strategically moved those FTS into 23-24 to maximize revenue. I have another chart later to show you how we did that. In 25-26, we have that 15,200 FTES because we pushed everything we could forward, knowing we're going to be on the funding floor. We could have claimed as many FTS we wanted this year, we would have still gotten the same revenue. So we're pushing everything we can into 26-27. When we do that, we will get out of that funding floor. When I came here a year ago, I was thinking we would still be in the funding floor in 26-27, but with our FTS growth, with a COLA that was larger than what we had projected, as well as some of our other metrics in the formula going up, we're coming out of that funding floor a little bit early. So here is what our FTES and revenue look like. That number across the top is our funded FTS. It's not going to match the previous page because our funded FTS take into account a 3-year average. As you can see, going from 21-22 through 25-26, you see a drop. That's because we're coming off of the emergency conditions allowance, no longer having that higher FTES to claim, but using our actual FTES. You can see our revenue there. We were on stability protection in 22-23. There was a COLA of 5.56. There was a base increase in that year as well, and a lot of money that they put into the formula, which is why we had that large increase there. In 23-24, we went back on the stability protection because our formula was not as high as that. And then as you can see, those 3 years are what we're talking about. Going from 23-24 to 24-25, even though there was a 1.07% COLA, we got less revenue in that year. So COLA was given, but we actually had a negative revenue and apportionment revenue that year. In 25-26, there was a COLA of 2.3%. We saw 0% new revenue because we were in that funding floor. Now, if we did not shift those FTES, those numbers would be even worse. However, strategically, we put the FTS where we could to maximize the revenue. So we're at the end of that 3-year period where we have not had new revenue since 23-24. In fact, we have less revenue now than we did 2 years ago inside apportionment. So here's what it looks like going forward. I took the 25-26 and moved that forward. When we go into 26-27, you can see our FTS are now going up. We are increasing our FTES, and we are back out of the funding floor on the SCFF calculated revenue, which is a good thing. The revenue increase we're looking in apportionment from 25-26 to 26-27 is $4.3 million. The COLA that's used is that 4.31%, which is the statutory COLA plus that discretionary COLA. However, if you can see, our revenue increase is only 3.29%. We're not getting a full percent of that COLA as we come out of this funding floor. This goes back to what we were talking about of that discretionary COLA that was given, even though it was given inside the formula. By doing that, we're not even recognizing that. We're getting just above what that statutory COLA is. And again, this is our first new revenue in 3 years. But we are coming out of that. Now that we're out of that funding floor, if we go forward and we estimate 2% COLAs with some modest growth, you can see our revenue will outpace COLA now that we were on the SCFF and out of those protections. If we can continue to grow steadily as we've been doing, and we continue to do the work we've been doing, we will be able to start outpacing COLA, getting out of these 3 years of no revenue. This is just a very simple version of how the student-centered funding formula is calculated. You can see the basic allocation, which is given to all districts just to open the doors. The FTS allocation, you can see we're growing because we're claiming as many FTS in this year as we can. So that got up as high as possible. Our supplemental allocation has gone up. We have increased in those metrics. Our success allocation has gone up. We've increased in those metrics as well. All of those are good things, but you can see that our overall revenue is still only at 3.29%. Even though our calculated revenue went up 8%, we were in that hold harmless, and a lot of that revenue was already given to us, which is why there's that difference. This gets us above the funding floor. Going forward, it's going to mean good news, but it's going to be another really tight year. Here is our history of revenue. You can see this is kind of just putting in. The blue bar is our apportionment revenue, and the orange bar is all of our other revenue. The other revenue is the ISP revenue we bring in. There's some non-Prop 20 lottery revenue, any rentals that we do here. All of that comes in to our district, but is not apportionment. You can see it's a small piece of that. That revenue, you can see it grew, and then again, we see 23, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26. It is flat. We're not getting new revenue over those 3 years. If you look at our history of expenses, again, those are growing while our revenue stayed flat. You can see those expenses continue to grow. Now, what we're showing you here is not what was shown in the budget in those years, because we are taking out any of the one-time solutions that we did. We are showing you what the true revenue and true expense were before we started using reserves or any solutions. This may be easier to read. I like the graph for the people who like graphs, but this is the numbers here. You can see our revenue and expense for each year without solutions. This is before grabbing from our reserves, using one-time savings or anything like that. We had negative budgets each year except for 22-23, which means each one of those years we had to come up with solutions of 4 million, 2.5, 7.4, 10.6, and this year $10.3 million. You can see below it are the solutions that we found each of those years, right? So our budgeted net income, while it looked we had a positive net budgeted income each of those years, it was because we had a collective close to $30 million of solutions over those years, which is drawing from our reserves, using a vacancy factor, using prior year savings. Those type of things helped us balance a budget over these tight times. But I think it's important to understand, I wanted to show you this, those top numbers are what our true budget was in each one of those years. Here is our history of one-time solutions. Again, in a graph form, we have used a vacancy factor, which is that bottom dark blue. We've used Fund 43, which is our capital outlay fund. We draw against that to pay for ongoing expenses using that one-time money. Fund 68, which we've talked about, is money that has been saved in a reserve to help with increased STRS and PERS costs. That's the gray bar. You can see how much we've used that over the years. The light blue on top is pre-funding transfers. That is, if we have savings in 1 year, we're going to use that savings to help the budget in the following year. Again, a one-time solution for those ongoing expenses. That green bar is other one-time funding. Those large chunks, primarily COVID funding in 21-22 and 24-25. Those were where we used a lot of COVID funding to fund ongoing expenses to balance the budget. And in 25-26, a lot of that was that student housing interest that we had that we used to balance the budget last year, which I said we could only use that one time. We don't have that again. So here you can see all of the different solutions and how much we did over the years to balance this budget. So as we get into this year's budget, here's the highlights. or lowlights, depending on how you look at it. Revenues of 156.5 with expenses of 158.6. We have $6 million more expenses this year than we did last year, with a net revenue of a negative $2 million. That would take our fund balance down to 15.5 million or 9.8%. This assumes that we are on the student center funding formula and not using any protections. We will still meet the 50% law and the FON. So how did we get there? I'm going to walk you through what we do in a very high level when we build this budget. We always start with last year's budget. So last year's budget, we had, with our solutions, we had a revenue of 152.8, expenses of 152.6 or 52 million.6. The first thing we do is remove all of those solutions that we did last year. Those weren't real. They were one time. We don't want to do those again if we can. After we remove that $10.8 million of solutions, which either adds expenses back in or takes out revenue, we start our initial budget after removal of solutions in a $10.6 million deficit. After we do that, we look at what our new revenues are. So, like we talked about, we do get new revenue from the student-centered funding formula this year, right? Our other revenues have increased. International students, grant indirects, our interest, all of those things, when we net them together, we get about $600,000 of new revenue. So in total, we have $5 million of new revenue this year. We had $4.8 million of new expenses. We have contractual steps and columns for staff that we have to pay each year. That's about $1.4 million. As you know, we were in a part of a class action lawsuit that went across the state for adjunct faculty. We settled that. We have a one-time payment of $2 million that we need to make this year. We needed additional adjunct and overload in our classes to increase our credit FTS by that 2%. We need to increase sections. If we increase sections, we need faculty to teach. We had $1 million increase there. Through program review, we had $1.3 million of increased costs that we need to operate the campus. Every other year we have an election. We are required to pay for that election. It costs us about $600,000. This year is the first year we're having some CERT payments fall off of our books from people who retired. We're saving about $500,000 there. Each year we'll get a little bit more back as those CERT payments fall off. Jasmine alluded to it. We unfunded some positions that are no longer needed. Over the past couple years, as people have left, we have decided we don't need to refill those positions. We saved about $1 million primarily through administrative positions we didn't fill. So with all of those new revenues and new expenses, our deficit coming into this year is $10.3 million. Now's the fun part is, what are our solutions? The same thing we do every year. So we look for solutions. We were able to find $8.2 million of these solutions. We looked through, again, a vacancy factor, not a freeze, but a chill, strategically bringing back people when we can. $3.5 million we're going to be able to save. Our STRS and PERS fund, 68, we're going to draw $3 million out of that. That almost completely wipes that out. That solution, like when I was here last year, I said we will not have student housing again. If we do this, we will not have that solution again next year. We're using Fund 43, where we have some money to pay for ongoing expenses using that one-time fund. We have $1 million there we can use. That's going to wipe out what we have in Fund 43. Fund 69 to help with retiree health and welfare, which we should be paying ongoing every year. We can use our balance there to pay for that. We'll have $4.5 million left that we could use in the future. But that's $8.2 million worth of solutions. And that did not balance the budget. Here's what the budget looks like as we just look at, apportionment from year to year. This is our revenue. You can see overall, even though we had the apportionment increase, we had those other decreases. So $3.7 million in revenue, $6 million in expenses, and you can see how it's all broken down there. This budget is built with 89.2% of our budget in salaries and benefits. Like Jasmine said, we value our employees. When we go through this budget, the one thing we want to make sure is we maintain our employees. This is non-touchable. We do not touch this. We are not touching our employees. We're ensuring that they remain whole. 89.2% of our expenses are in salary and benefits. So if we look over here, these are the operating expenses. Now, I will tell you, some of the salary and benefits on the last page is that short-term college assistance. We brought that over here because while there are employees, those can be discretionary. Those are not our permanent staff. So if you can see, we have about $20.6 million in these operating expenses. The column on the left, that 9.2, those are fixed, are required expenses. We have to pay our utilities. We have to pay our insurance, maintenance, our colleague system, the election expense, equipment, software, legal services, auditors. These are required expenses. On the right, they're variable expenses. Those are the expenses that could be adjusted. Now, I'm not saying we don't need those. We need a lot of those. But as we look to right size our expenses, these are the areas we need to look at. We have our short-term employees and college assistants. We have our other operating expenses. We kind of lump those together. That's a lot of different things. We have consultants there. Hold on, I wrote a list here because I knew the question would come. We have stuff in there. It's consultants, conferences, our athletic team travel, our academic team travel, our credit card expense, our different ISP expenses for recruiting. All of that kind of makes up that $2 million. We have contract services for different things. We have supplies and materials, supplementary services. All of those different things are things we need. But as we go through, this is what we need to look at if we're going to make cuts, because we're not touching our permanent staff and there are certain fixed expenses we have. So again, worst comes to worst, $2 million to balance a budget has to be found from there. It's not a lot. The next few slides is informational. This talks about our force costs. These are the costs that went through program review and how we funded. We had $4 million of requests going into program review. After going through them, we found about $1 million we cut out that they were not considered force costs. That left us with about $3 million. This is where I want to credit our executive cabinet, our deans, our directors, everyone. We went through and we found any other place we could fund these besides Fund 11, whether it's an existing budget, Perkins funding, lottery funding, other self-supporting revenue, anything we could find to fund that so it did not hit Fund 11. We found 1.7, almost $1.8 million to fund those items that are necessary to provide instruction at the college. That left with $1.3 million we needed to fund out of Fund 11. That was about $1 million of ongoing costs. Those are costs that when we put them in, they will be ongoing every year. There's about $240,000 of one-time expenses. Those that we need to fund this year, but will come off the books the following year. So here's the summary. We have our beginning fund balance. We're hoping to have about 17.6 million as we end the year. That's what we're projecting. With our revenues, expenses, and a deficit of $2 million, that leaves our fund balance at 15.5 or 9.8%. I want to revisit the fund balance again. I told you we'd come back to this. College of the Canyons, our board policy recommends a 16.7. That is what is recommended by the state. You can see the history there. There's two columns. One is our Fund 11. That is what we kind of monitor. We've monitored over the years. You can see over the years we grew it up and then it's dropping back down to 9.8. On the right is what our true reserves were when we include all of those other funds, 43, 68, and 69, the ones we've been drawing from. You can see we were at 23%. Right? It dropped a little bit. That's gone all the way down after this budget drastically to 13%. That's including all of our revenues now, or all of our reserves, not just the Fund 11. Here is the history of our fund balance for Fund 11. You can see percentage. We went up, dropped a little bit, maintained, and then there's that significant drop down to 9.8%. The blue line is it in dollars. You can see a steady growth with that drop in 26.27. This is the fund balance reserve for all of those other reserve funds we've had, that Fund 43, 68, and 69. You can see they were high. We kind of maintained them. And in the last 3 years to balance the budget, we've depleted them. That orange line drops off precipitously all the way down to in 26, 27. The blue line, which is our Fund 43, is not there anymore. The green line, which is our Fund 69, we only have to draw so much out of that, but you can see over the last 5 years, it is slowly going down. That's what's happening to our reserves. All of those one-time solutions no longer are one-time. We do not have those going forward. So you can see of our expenses, if we use our Fund 11 fund balance and we add in what we believe we'll have left in 68, 69, and 43 at the end of the year, we'll have 20.57 million and only a 13% fund balance of all reserves at the end of this year. If we compare that just to last year, it's $8 million less. So what does that mean going forward? I know we haven't done this before, but I want to project our revenue expenses over the next few years without solutions. This is without doing anything else. This is assuming a 2% COLA applied to the SCFF every year. If we have a 2% FTS increase, 2% is a very conservative number, which is why we use it a lot here. 2% increase in all of our other non-apportionment revenue every year, if we can get some slight increases there. Increases to salary and benefits for the contractual steps and columns each year, which is about 2% to salaries and benefits, and our operating expenses, just the cost of all of those going up each year. What we would also do is we would remove that adjunct settlement of $2 million. That's a one-time in 26, 27. We're going to take it out in 27, 28. That will help us. And then we'll also flip in and out that $600,000 for the election expense, which goes in and out. So this is what we're going to look like. In 26, 27, we have that there. We know what that is. Without a solution, it's a $10.3 million deficit. But each year after that, you can see it gets smaller. We are coming out. We can do it. It will take time. Without solutions next year, with all of those assumptions, we're looking at about a $5 million deficit. The next year, $3 million. The next year, $2 million. It is getting smaller. We can do this, but we have to be strategic in how we move forward in the next few years. Because we're out of the funding floor, because we are now getting new revenue, it is brighter on the other side. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I know I have a lot more jokes usually when I do this. I'm trying to throw a few in just to get a couple laughs. But I want to impress upon you where we are in the budget. We're at a critical point right now. We can come out, but we have to do this. And like Jasmine said, I keep saying we, it is we as a college. Outside of Fund 11, we have some other funding sources that augment our state funding, which help us move programs along, even when the Fund 11 revenue is not there. You can see this chart shows our grants that we've had over the years. We have about $23.5 million that we're projecting to bring in 26, 27. These next couple slides, I'm going to quickly go through. You have there in front of you. These are all the different categorical programs with funding that we got in 25, 26. There's what we spent in 25, 26, and then there's money left over in 26, 27. Overall, we have about $7.8 million of leftover categorical from last year to spend this year on all of these different programs. This is the new categorical funding that we received in 26, 27 to help out with these different programs, another 14.3. All of this funding sits in our Fund 12, which is our restricted fund. That money needs to be used specifically for these programs. They're not funding we can bring in to help us with our unrestricted budget. What you're approving tonight is appropriations for us. These are all of the funds. We spend a lot of time on Fund 11 because that is our unrestricted fund where we have a lot of discretion of what we do. But these are all of our funds. We have about 25 different funds. All of the other funds are restricted to certain purposes. You can see there are facility funds. That's what holds our GEO bond money. There are self-supporting funds, such as our Performing Arts Center or an Employment Training Institute. Our liability funds, which are funds 68 and 69, which we've talked about, which are going down. And then we have our student funds where our financial aid is held, as well as the student rep fee and scholarship pass-through. Overall, it's a $435 million budget. So we always like to finish here with our advocacy. Usually we have 3 or 4 points we want to advocate for. We're focusing on one. Jasmine talked about it already. It's what our focus has been in all of our advocacy over the last few months. It is the student-centered funding formula flexibility, allowing us and other districts to claim the higher of the current year FTES or the 3-year average. This would allow districts, including ours, to be fully funded through the SCFF and not constrained by growth. When you have a 3-year average, every year that gets bigger, you don't get funded for those FTS you serve because it's pulling the average down. In the current model, districts who are on hold harmless or stability do not receive COLA through the formula. If you are on any of those protections, if you cannot claim all of your FTS, you are not getting new revenue. We showed you with us, we are not getting the full amount. We are getting a smaller amount because we're constrained. Making this change would not harm any district. This is an advocacy point we've been talking about over and over. There is no losers. There are no losers. In the student-centered funding formula, when there were changes proposed, it was always how many districts win, how many districts lose, because it was shifting money around. This is a proposal that will only help districts. The cost to implement this, according to the state chancellor's office, is $38 million in 26-27. It's not a huge amount. Both the Senate and Assembly have endorsed this change in their budgets that they're submitting to the governor. So we need to continue our advocacy on this point. This would help us. It would mean more money to us in 26-27. So how do we balance this budget? Jasmine said we will not bring a deficit budget at adopted. That is our promise. We will turn over every proverbial couch cushion to find what we can to balance the budget this year. I don't know how we're going to do it the year after that. We're going to have to make significant changes. We're going to have to work towards that, but we can do it this year. One of the things we're looking for, again, if they change the SCFF, that could mean another $3 to $5 million for us in revenue. It depends how it's implemented and how the calculation actually flows through. I don't want to say it could be a huge amount because sometimes the way it gets calculated through the SCFF would change that, but I believe it could be another $3 to $5 million to our district. That would cover our $2 million deficit. That would put us on the road in future years to not have deficits going into those years. If that does not happen, we can use current year savings for future year expenses. Again, it's kicking the can down the road. If you notice, I did not have any of those solutions in this budget right now because I don't know how we're going to end this year. Right now, I am projecting we will have savings, but it's not like in years past where I think it's $1 million or $2 million. Right now, I think, and even in our monthly financials, I think it's about $500,000 or $600,000. We could use it, right? We'll take it, but we have to see how we end the year and what we can do. After that, like Jasmine said, we'll follow our AP and BP. We will collaboratively review our current rollover budgets to find savings. Those are the things we need to do over the next few months before I stand back before you in September and bring you an adopted budget. And like Jasmine said, we will bring a balanced budget. We'll let you know how it was done, and we'll do it together as a college. So here's our next steps. You can kind of see where we are right there. We're at June 10th, the tentative budget workshop. The governor will approve his budget June 30th. We have to file a tentative budget with the county before July 1st. July and August, we're getting to work. We have to balance this budget over that time. We have an adopted budget workshop on September 9th. That's when we will bring back to you what has happened. And then we need to file that with the state controller's office by September 15th. Any questions?
Before you get to your questions, I do want to leave with a final note. One of the things that I think is really important that we need to address here is how collectively this college has come to be able to provide those solutions over the years. So we have used that vacancy factor that Jason had alluded to. That's on the backs of every employee on this campus, because when we have a vacancy, it means somebody else is helping us do that work. It's not like the work goes away. So I need to acknowledge both the faculty and classified staff who have been able to do that, the administrators who have stepped in to help, to ensure that the work continues for our students. And so collectively, we have all contributed to those solutions to be able to find that. While it does, the future years, it's getting less grim. We have been through the hardest 3 years of the budget. We are making our way out of that. And so Jason has told us in the years, it's going to get hard. It's going to get hard. We're in that hard right now. And so we are finding our ways through as collectively as the college to do that. So I want to first acknowledge everybody's work to be able to do it, but know that we are coming out of the hard times. We will have solutions to do this. As Jason said, that was a conservative estimate of our growth of what it is our revenues could be at that 2%. This college has worked really hard to grow our programs. We are really ensuring that we're doing everything we can to be able to continue that growth. Our faculty and our staff help tirelessly help our students get into their classes and succeed in their classes. We have an entirely new planning structure that we're utilizing in order to be able to utilize that growth. We presented the new formulas that we're going to be using for our enrollment management. So we have solutions going forward, but for our budget, we're being conservative. We need to showcase what conservatively what will happen. But I think collectively as a college, we are all dedicated to increasing that revenue, to ensuring that all of us are benefiting from the hard work that we're putting in. So I just want to say we are in those hard times, but I do see a really good future for us. I know it's hard because it's not the greatest, but
I'm sorry, usually
Really,
there's more laughs
we're
in my.
going to
thing.
be good. We're in the hard times right now, but
I
we
also want to
are going be
apologize to
good.
everyone behind me who had to look at my back the entire time. I'm sorry. Any questions?
We're just gonna have a lot of fun. Sounds like.
I think we need to have some dialogue on it, as a board. And there's just a lot of things that we have to kind of vet out and
And
kind of openly, like we've been kicking the can
Mhm.
and you can't keep kicking the can. It's interesting. If you don't make changes when you need to make changes, you end up having to, if you don't, like, if you slowly just kind of fix a wound, but don't go to the doctor, you're eventually going to have cancer. If you don't fix a wound and you just kind of let it go, you're going to have a serious infection and, something the good's not going to happen. And I think that, we're at that point where we need to really address this from a community standpoint. And it's hard to address because our biggest expense and our biggest opportunity to save is with people, and people are so important, right? So nobody wants to talk about that, and it's important we look at efficiencies. We ask ourselves, where can we pick up efficiencies? Where can we stop doing certain things on campus? There's certain things, there's certain things that you can perhaps it doesn't have as much of effect on things that we think they are. And what are those? How do we look at that? How do we as a community, ask our community to go to our elected officials to advocate for that $38 million? I mean, that's a whole campaign in itself because that could fix part of the problem. Just a couple more thoughts, and I'd love to get your input, the rest of the boards. This $2 million settlement that we had to have. We settled a $2 million lawsuit or a settlement with the overtime laws that our legislatures created, in which we had to pay, and we got our money from them. I think that's really interesting that have we asked them to help pay for it since they created a law that put us in that corner? I mean, these are tough questions we have to ask, but people are afraid to ask them, right?
I think that one of the important things is, you're right, we are not touching people, right? That is our value. And in all honesty, the more you cut, the more you're not going to make. You have to invest in the people. You have to make sure that the people are whole. in order to do the best work that we can do on behalf of the district. I think there are a lot of solutions that do not affect people that we can do. And we have been putting those in place for the last few years. We really are examining the positions as they come open. Do we need that position? We looked at what we were spending on cell phone allowances. Let's be more efficient in that area. I think we need to look at how are we doing our advertising? Are we doing it in the right places? Analyzing those things so that we hit the right places for the right times. These are all solutions that we can do over the next few months that do not take away from employees. And that is a no-go. We are not doing that. But we have $2 million of which we can find solutions for that will not affect our employees or will not affect our students. And I think that collectively we can make that happen. Like I said, this is all built off of the May revise. We don't know what the final budget will be for California. And as you said with that dialogue, that's a dialogue we're going to be having over the next few months that we will continue to have with you as well. Because I'm asking you to adopt a budget or adopt the tentative budget, approve the tentative budget so that we can get to work on that. And so the hard part about the budgets in the states is we find out the May revise and we have to get it done by June 30. But we're going to take the time to be more efficient in what it is that we're doing with our budget.
I had a question, and maybe you could help me understand this one in terms of getting out of COLA. I think I wrote down that we have to be above the funding floor.
Correct.
Now, how did you project that we would be above that the year?
It's a large spreadsheet I have where I calculated the SCFF. We take all of our FTES, we project increases, I project the COLA, we have all of our other metrics. There's 29 metrics that go into that formula. And we calculate it out to say, here is what the student-centered funding formula will pay us in future years. The variables in all of that is, are we going to hit those growth targets? And are we going to hit, or what the COLA is going to be in from the state that's put back into the formula. So using those assumptions on that previous page, if all of those things happen, that's what it will look like.
When we sat down, and I think this when we were first elected, and you had I had posed the question of when you thought we would come out of hold harmless, and I think the projection was 3 to 4 years, so we would have been stagnant anyways, correct?
Correct. When we were having that 18 months ago, based on where our FTS were at that time, and we used over 2 years, a 2% COLA, 2% COLA with a 2% growth. We've hit over that in growth, over that in COLA, and our other metrics have gone up. That's why we're coming out in this year as opposed to next year.
Okay. And also, I know that you guys have looked at all operating expenses, and I'm sure you're going to continue to reassess. And I'm just going to bring this up too. Even if we didn't have, just going into elections, if none of our elections are contested, that would be $600,000 savings too, is right?
That's true. Yes.
Okay. And have we looked at other areas too that potentially could be? I'm just throwing
Absolutely.
everything out.
And thank you very much. And this is what came at PAC B. And as I bring this, we've looked at everything I can think of, but I'm not saying I've thought of everything. So
Sure.
anything you can throw at me, anything anyone can throw at me, we can absolutely look at it. Like Jasmine said, we've looked at cell phones, and I'll tell you that probably saved us $100,000 to $150,000 by reducing just the cell phone allowance. Something that should have been done a long time ago. But we're all looking at those different areas of where we can cut back to save 50,000 at a time or 75,000 at a time. That's what we're going to have to do.
I have a question, and want to get your input. I was flying on an airplane one time with a gentleman that retired from the Secretary of State's office. He was pretty high up. And I just asked him point blank, I says, now that you're retired, and because he used to make the budgets and be a part of it, he grew through the ranks. I said, now that you're retired, could we ever have a balanced budget, or could we ever not deficit spend? And he goes, well, yeah, because there's, areas that we know on the ground, like when you're in the office of the Secretary of State, that we know we could get by without. but many times the top might not know that. And it was just a big aha to me, the president, and, all those that make the budget in Congress. It was a big aha to me, and he did mention that. He goes, there's a lot of areas where, I always say that the people at the ground floor of the bank are the ones that talking to the customers, but the ones making the decisions are the ones on the floor. I'm sure we've done this, but have we, initiated and had initiative where we really ask our rank and file, everybody, where can we, this is our initiative. Where can we really get scrappy and be scrappy as an organization to get through this? And I'm sure there's, so with that in mind, thoughts concerning that?
Exactly what we need to be doing over the next few months. So, part of our board policy and AP is that we work with everybody to determine their ongoing budgets. What is it that's not being used? So let's take, for example, if we go over to the Vice President of Student Services office and say, you have $30,000 in there, but you've only spent $23,000 over the last few years. Are you okay if this year we allocate $23,000? And we have those conversations and they go, oh, no, 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 because this year this comes in and that's why I've had that, so
Yeah.
we have to have those conversations to be able to see what is it that we can do? Because Jason and I are not going to stand here and go, I'm cutting your budget, I'm cutting your
Sure.
budget. It's, come on, talk to us. What is it that could be done? Exactly like you're saying, the people on the ground floor are the ones who know.
Mhm.
They know exactly that. Steve Irwin will know that he bought 25,000 sheets of transcript paper and he's not going to need to next year. So we can take that back. That's the kind of stuff that we need to do.
I think the messaging from the top needs to come that if you come to us and say, look, we can do without 10 hours of this person or whatever that is, right? We're not going to hold that against them next year because if they need that person, I mean, it's almost like we're not lowering your bar, we're not lowering your budget. We're really simply looking for solutions. Because the biggest challenge becomes, it becomes like, well, not in my pot because next year I'm not getting my 3% or my 2% or my 1%. Or they're not, I'm gonna need that person X. And I think it's the spirit that we have to go about this is not to look on how it's been done in the past, which is, oh, I lost that for my budget. Now, I'm not gonna get back next year.
Mhm.
And I think the spirit needs to be, we need your help. And we're going to look at this every year because you might have a tremendous need for X, Y, or Z. And I think as that goes the spirit of no more retaliation, no more, just we're in this
Collaboration.
together.
Yep.
And
Collaboration.
collaboration. And if you come up with some cuts, we're definitely not going to cut that next year on you. We're going to have another conversation. And I really want that to be the spirit from the top all the way down, that's the spirit we're looking for.
And I think that's a really important point to make because I can tell you for years, we've all been worried about somebody coming in and cutting our budget because we'll never get it back. That's kind of the mentality that we have all lived with of don't take my budget because I'll never see it again. And we saw that, right? In 2008, when the budget went really bad, we got these cuts and then we really had to like claw back money afterwards. So if we take that approach that you're talking about, saying this is a one-time cut, then we'll reestablish next year what is it that we need. That's a good conversation to have with everybody because it might not be that we need the transcript paper next year, but we definitely need it next year. So I can't go with that cut ongoing. But that's the kind of collaboration that we need to do. It's breaking those old habits that of no, because once it's gone, I'm never going to see it. And so we have to rebuild that trust of, okay, but we're going to work collectively to do that. And that's going to be hard because that's a cultural shift that we haven't had here. And so it's really important to say that out loud of if we go in with that mentality, then it might be easier for people to say, you know what, I can do it here. And it makes it easier to be able to come up with that $2 million.
But the commitment needs to be from the board that this is the philosophy we're going to take.
Very much
And
so.
to you, the one person we evaluate that it's going to go down that way, and that's the important thing. So that trust can be built.
And one of the things I'll add that shows we do that, if you look, we did add $1.3 million of forced costs this year. Even though we're in a budget, our department chairs, our directors, our faculty, our classified staff, they came and said, these are costs we need this year to operate, and we implemented them in the budget to find solutions. We have that avenue through the program review process, right? So if it is cut, bring it back next year, have it there, we will put that back in. And people have heard me say that we always want to fund the need, right? I'm not trying to steal the foundation's tagline of fund the need, but if there is a need, we want to make sure that is funded. If you come with the need, I cannot operate this class, I cannot operate this program without this, we will fund it and we will find a way to get that done.
Jason, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
First of all, Jason, thank you very much. I can remember sitting here year after year after year and looking at reams of paper and booklets and spiral notebooks and drowning in minutia and numbers and not understanding half of it. So I want to thank you for the way you have prepared this in such a succinct and clear way. I also want to salute you and Jasmine both for being so honest and transparent with us and allowing us to be part of the conversation. I don't think we've ever been invited to be part of the conversation. So thank you both very much for that. You mentioned 2008, and I can remember in the downturn in 2008, department chairs and other people, academic senate and forth, sitting together. And I'm trying to remember who the VP of instruction was because we've gone through so many. But there was a huge thermometer, and we were told, you have got to cut this much money. And us sitting around the table thinking, well, this is 600,000 and here's 200,000, and trying to see that thermometer go up. I do think it's going to take everyone coming together to look at every and each department and program and service. So whether it's admissions and records or whatever the department is, everybody's going to have to be working on this together. And that would include the board. And I was thinking, what is our role in this? How can we demonstrate or play our own part? And you've mentioned it, and cutting back in our expenses. And we certainly go to a lot of events and we go to a lot of conferences. And it's not just the conference, you pay the fee for the conference, but that includes meals and transportation and hotels. It's a lot that is involved. So I really think that we need to set the tone and take a look at our budget and have some serious conversations. And the truth is, there's lots of things for education that are available to us online and that wouldn't cost us that much.
And that is a good segue because your next agenda item
Is
board
our
tentative
BOT budget.
So you guys also have your work for the next few months between
Yes.
tentative and adopted as well.
Yes. But thank you to both of you, and we'll just have to get together and work at it.
I want to thank both of you because this is very thorough. I mean, I've seen budgets, but this one here, I mean, I like what's fixed and what we can have variable cuts. And that's almost $11.5 million that we have available to see to carve out 2 million. As I'm looking at software licensing, memberships and dues, some of the operating, I mean, this is where all of us really have to think about, okay, where is that? Because I remember at City College, we did the same thing. We were in the hole, we're down, I think down to $1 million now, but we're still, and that's where all these variable expenses are key. Right. And then, when you have this fixed, I'm also thinking look at utilities. $4.3 million in utilities. I think we even have a conversation last year about solar, I think at some point. But these are real things, and I'm hoping, I guess, because I function on hope, that what we get in the next week or so will have as an idea to at least get us to balance the budget. But even that, we still need to really think about the future. We can't just think, okay, well, we get it this year, but although you project less deficit as we move through, we want to be able to, we need to cover all those things and always keep an eye on the variable expenses. Because otherwise, yeah, because even the fixed costs are going to go up.
Absolutely.
And I think you pointing out things like our utilities, we've been really advocating for being able to move to more sustainability, right? Solar, things like that. We put in this year for an appropriation request through Congressman Whiteside's office to do exactly that. We asked for $3 million to be able to do, I think 3.5 actually, to be able to do more green initiatives on campus to bring down those utility costs. Now they've cut it to 850,000, but that's still 850,000 that we would be able to put towards those initiatives to bring down our utilities. So we are looking at other avenues as well to be able to kind of take care of those ongoing costs that hopefully we can bring down over the years. So we need to look at that across the way. And that was, even leading into Canyons Compass later, that's one of our priorities is to be able to become more sustainable because that will help our budget in the long run. So there's so many avenues to this budget to ensure that we are making headway over the next few years. Because I would love to be able to showcase, here's the revenue we will be getting and how we share in that revenue with our employees, with everybody, so that we can build a bigger sustainable program for our students. That's our hope.
Because it's important for us to also think about what's happening now, but we have to also look ahead, right? And
Absolutely.
as we're building things right now, we have to look at this. What I like the projections. I'm a projection. Okay, so it's where we are now. Where are we going to be over here? Where can we grow? Where can we, what is going to be with certain demographic realities? Are those things going to affect us?
Right.
Right? We might see 2% growth. How long is that going to go? Is it going to go higher? It could also, whatever goes up can also come down.
Exactly. Yeah.
So those are the variables that are important for us to kind of think about as well.
From the economy.
Exactly.
My question just was posed of when we started to experience this downward turn, it was kind of that pivotal time frame from COVID, correct? Or were we already trending in a deficit for
So-
quite some time and pulling from reserves consistently?
I'll tell you, it was before a little bit.
Mhm.
What happened during COVID? All of the money we received during COVID, I talked about that emergency conditions allowance. We as a district treated that as ongoing money. When it was money in and we put ongoing expenses against it. It was a protection we were given. It is a protection that came off and no new revenue came in. And when we as a district put ongoing expenses against what was essentially one-time funding, that's what put us in this situation. So during COVID and other stuff, if we would get one-time funding and say, great, let's put ongoing expenses against that. And then when the one-time funding goes away, the ongoing expenses do not. One of the things that we need to do, and I'm trying to do, is have an understanding of what is ongoing and what is one time. Those need to be separated out and they need to be matched against each other. For too long, we've been using one-time revenues or one-time solutions against ongoing expenses. And it's really having that deep look of what is one time and what is ongoing. Because yes, it came through apportionment, but it was done through an emergency condition allowance with FDS. We did not have that would be going away. I've talked to a lot of other districts who did treat it as one-time funding. They covered expenses, but not putting ongoing expenses against it. And they're in a better place than we are. There are districts who did even worse and took all the COVID funding and put ongoing expenses against it. And they're in a worse place than where we are. Right? Those are type of things. And I'll tell you, international students, and they talk today about the revenue they're bringing in. That's great. It is helping us. That needs to be treated as one-time revenue because that could go away. And if we treat that as ongoing revenue, we could be in situations that other districts are in when they treat one-time revenue and put ongoing expenses against it. That is the biggest thing that we need to look at differently and do going forward.
That makes sense. Because what I'm hearing you say is that we should have been conservative that entire time in terms of our expenditures and
Yes.
been trying to look at where we could cut during that time because it wasn't going to be consistent.
I don't even think cut. Not necessarily cut, just not increase.
Okay.
Yeah.
With ongoing, like,
With
hey,
ongoing,
let's,
yeah.
we're doing this, let's buy this new thing that we have to continue to do. Let's add more.
Okay.
Yeah.
This can change the trajectory though, if it does come back in,
Yeah.
in terms of where he approves the budget from the governor.
Absolutely. Yeah, if the, what is recommended from the, Assembly and Senate, if that reconciles and the things remain in it and the governor takes that, that could help fix it right away.
For this year.
Yeah.
For this, and again, the one thing I want to do that is
This year.
we still need to look at it differently,
Yeah.
right? If that happens, we can't say, great, we're good, let's go forward. We still need to have these conversations. We still need to project out and we still need to match revenues to expenses, one time to one time, ongoing to ongoing. And I will do that. I will help do that and we will do that together.
What I will ask is that we make cuts and savings as far away from the classroom and instruction
Absolutely.
as possible. And I think you've already done that to some degree with your executive cabinet, that people have left and you have not replaced those positions. But if we could protect the instruction program
And that's
and
exactly.
direct services to students.
That's
above all
exactly what I was
else.
gonna
Yeah.
add is
And direct
instructional services and the support services for
for
students.
students.
I really want to keep those intact.
Yeah.
So how is it then that we can go forward with that?
Mhm.
And doing things like changing the cell phone allowance, changing how we did our business travel policy. Things like that all help with those ongoing expenses that we do, but they're not affecting our classroom and our students.
Well, and even it just occurs to me that asking us to start using our laptops
Yeah.
instead of all this paper,
Yes,
right? So it's
Really
even
the-
small
yeah.
things like that,
Yes.
that we can do in ways that are more efficient.
exactly. Like,
One small thing. Remember how we used to have like 28 Connex boxes out there?
yes.
We went through and cleaned a lot of that out and saved $20,000 a year in rentals for Connex. Like it's all of that stuff.
Yes. All of those kinds of things we just need to be better at. And that's what we're doing. So thank you for all going to your laptops so that we can not print
get
because
my point?
even those kinds of things, John's shaking his head over there. Yes, it's in his area that he pays for the paper. We need to make sure that we're becoming an efficient campus. So, Thank
One
you.
last thing. You did a great job with your presentation and you were great with your own comments and with speaking to us prior to turning the floor to Jason. I think whatever advocacy can be done at the state level, that the two of you would be great spokespersons. So
Thank you.
it's important for the message to get up to Sacramento. Or invite our legislators to visit the campus and do it right here. So we
I
don't
do
have
have
to
to say-
fly there.
One of the things that Jason and I did 2 weeks ago was meet with Suzette Valadares in regards to exactly this. And I got to see her at the Boys and Girls Club event on Saturday night and I said, thank you, because the budget came out from the Senate to be able to say, yes, it includes the flexibility. And she's like, great, see what you're doing is working. So our message is getting out there.
Mhm.
And I think that it's important we continue to do that collectively from the board level, from the college level, from all of our advocacy groups here on campus as well.
Thank you.
So is there any more comments? Because now we are going to position to approve the tentative budget. So can I get a motion to approve the 2026-27 tentative budget?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Can I get a roll call vote, Ms. Ramirez?
Trustee Trevino,
Aye.
trustee Guerrero,
Aye.
trustee Alonso,
Aye.
trustee Arnold.
Yes.
Aye. Moving on to 6.2 and